Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the very first episode of the Signal Chain podcast. I'll be your host, Clay Blackwell. I am super excited to be doing this. It's something that I've wanted to do for a very long time. On today's first episode, pilot episode, we're going to get into my story, a little bit about me, and then also what you can expect from this podcast, why I started the podcast, the main motivation, and so on and so forth. So obviously, you already know my name. It's Clay Blackwell. I'm 26. I'm a music artist, and I've grown up in Salem, Virginia all my life. And I've loved music since I was old enough to understand it. I've been playing music for 7-8 years now, give or take. I stepped into vocals about a year ago, specifically harsh screaming vocals, and then I've been playing drums for about 7 years, give or take. So that's kind of my musical background. Growing up, music was always a big outlet for me, but it didn't always start out that way. It grew over time, and my musical exposure as a kid was about the same as everybody else's, but I think it's an important part of my story. So, growing up, I compartmentalized it as each car that I rode in as a kid was a different soundtrack almost. And, for instance, if I was in the car with my mother, she would play a lot of like mainstream Christian radio music, or she would play like mainstream like country music. And that in itself was a lot of what I heard growing up. But then if I got in the truck with my dad, it was mainstream country, or it was like this old outlaw country like Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash and Hank Jr. and Hank Sr. and stuff like that, David Allan Coe, etc. And then there was like mainstream radio rock, and that's an important part of the story. And you got Skinner and Rolling Stones and Def Leppard, all those kind of old rockers, if you will. And then I heard the song "Blurry" by Puddle of Mudd, and everybody has that one song growing up that they remember. It's like that moment, and it just encapsulates you. It takes you over, and you're like, what is this? Like, this is so cool. So that was the song for me, and to this day, even if the band's not huge, like, it's still the only song that I have like an adolescent connection to myself, if you will. So that was what I heard in the truck with my dad, and that kind of kick-started my journey with rock music or heavy music, if you will. And then moving into like the car with my sister, I have 2 older sisters. My oldest used to drive us to school, and I hated it because she always played like the most bubblegum pop you could think of. And it's crazy because today I've grown to love it, some of it at least. And she would play like Kesha and Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande and like all these like pop artists like Justin Bieber, like all this stuff that I didn't really like at the time. So like my musical exposure growing up was very diverse. I remember hearing Recovery by Eminem when it, shortly after it came out, briefly. I wish I could listen to Not Afraid again for the first time, but I think we all like feel that way in some form or another. So growing up, I listened to a lot of different music. But again, Puddle of Mudd kickstarted my journey into rock music. Several years later, we were renting this house, and there were these guys up the street from me that played Xbox. They were older, so they were automatically cooler. And they had the original Xbox. They had Halo Reach, and their mom always kept the pantry stocked with like fruit gushers and like everything that like a young adolescent Clay could want, like all the junk food you could imagine. So immediately I'm like, well, I'm going to go there. So I used to walk up the street to his house and like basically just show up unannounced and be like, yo, I came to play Xbox. And we would play Halo Reach, and they were playing bands like Pillar and Bullet for My Valentine and Slipknot. And I heard Bullet for My Valentine, Tears Don't Fall for the first time. And that was my first exposure to like screaming, like really aggressive screaming, like Matt Tuck screaming. And, they're playing the music video on another screen, and Matt Tuck's screaming into a microphone, playing guitar, and like there's rain falling everywhere. And I'm like, what is this? Like, I didn't even know there was such a thing as like screaming music. And I didn't like hate it, but I didn't like love it because I didn't know, my brain couldn't understand like what was going on. So, And they were also playing Pillar, which is a Christian rock band from the early 2000s, which I still love. I really love their music. It's just like so kick-ass. So, I would always hang out there, and I was exposed to a lot of different bands. And later on, I discovered Linkin Park, obviously, and then that kind of kick-started everything else. I mean, it's kind of cliche. It's like, oh, I found Linkin Park, and then I found, Asking Alexandria and all these other bands, and that's very much my story. Like, I discovered Linkin Park, and Linkin Park pretty much was the catalyst that lit the fuse to everything else. So that's kind of a little bit about me and growing up and my story and how I got into heavy music. If you already follow me and you already know me personally, it's either because you know me locally and you're checking out my podcast, and I appreciate that, or you know me from my original channel, Clay Blackwell. You can find me everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, Threads, but mainly on YouTube, and Instagram is typically where I post a lot. If you want to see cool drum content, be sure to check out, all the links in the bio. I make drum videos and stuff like that. So if you're into drumming and you're into a nerd, then obviously check it out. So the main motivation for this podcast was, honestly, there's a certain power to external dialogue. There's something about it that I've always loved, and loved it when it was captured. Just being able to sit and listen to a conversation in a fly on the wall mentality, and listen to specifically other artists talk about their experience and how they got good at what they're doing. Rappers, rappers and rock musicians and pop artists, and, even producers, just people talk about their musical experience and how they got good at what they're getting at, or trying to get good at, provides a lot of value. And that's something that's really helped me over the 8 years that I've been doing music, roughly. It's really cool when you can just listen to somebody's knowledge and advice and apply it, and it works. So that was like the main motivation for this podcast, was I want to sit down with, you guys and my artist friends that I've made over the years, and talk about life, talk about music, talk about culture, talk about, wherever the conversation leads us. I don't really plan on scripting any of this. I really just want to have one talking point to start with, and then just let the conversation flow from there and be organic as possible, because I think that's when the best results happen. I've seen it in songs I've wrote, I've seen it in the friends I've made, and I've seen it in, just life, just being spontaneous and letting things happen organically. I think is kind of a lost cause, not a lost cause, a lost value that we've kind of thrown away. Everything's edited and perfect, and we put on this, like, I'm perfect, picture to the world on our phones every day for posting, on social media and TikTok and whatnot. So that's kind of, something that I've really loved about it. And I've listened to Joe Rogan. I've listened to, my favorite podcast right now is Chris Williamson's podcast. They talk a little bit more about philosophy and life and self-help and stuff like that, and I'm really into that. I'm very much into people receiving the help they need, mentally or physically. But he recently just started interviewing bands like Under Oath and some other ones on there too. I don't think he's done Architects yet, but I'm rooting for him to do Architects if he hasn't. So shout out Chris Williamson, you're the man. He's also British, and he lives in Texas, I believe, which is really sick. Lives in like the most American state, and he's British. And he came here and I don't know if he came here. Maybe he was born here or something. I don't know. But he made a podcast, and it's done really well. It's like number 6 in podcasts right now. He just crossed like 1,000 episodes with Matthew McConaughey. So that's super sick. So it's really cool to see people put themselves out there in a way that's as authentic and normal as possible, and have open, normal, knowledgeable conversations, and it provides a lot of value to the world. So I think there's something really cool about external dialogue. But I'm going to have a lot of different people on here. I'm going to do full bands eventually. Can't promise I can get anybody big on here quite yet, but if you have any requests for me to, interview a certain artist of yours that you'd like to talk, me to talk with or listen in, hit me up and let me know. You can email the podcast directly. It'll be all down in the description below, or tag us in a post. But I'm really excited to be starting this journey. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys, and thank you for all your support. And yeah, stay tuned for episode 2. We'll talk to you soon, guys. Bye.